Good afternoon. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. You're so welcome at Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, the expert discussion, Ukraine in Czech Electoral Discourse, Trends and Challenges. So, the topic of today's discussion will cover the key anti-Ukrainian messages and narratives that could have been heard during the electoral campaign in Czech Republic. In 2025, we'll also discuss the role of social media in electoral processes that we've observed in Czech Republic, and also we'll focus on how can we communicate effectively about Ukraine, Russian-Ukrainian war, how can we communicate it to Czech people, and we will try to foresee how shall our bilateral relations develop after the election that we had in October in Czech Republic. Okay, well, starting with a presentation that we've prepared. We'll start it now, and it actually is based on the survey that was published on our website today, on UCMC website. So if you'd like to dig deep into details and our accomplishments and results, so if you want to track which narratives were widespread, what was spreading about Ukraine during the Czech electoral campaign, so you can actually visit our website. You're welcome. And we're coming specifically to the presentation now. Okay. So I would love to start with the characteristics of the general trends, social trends observed in Czech society, because electoral campaign is, let's say, a sort of a response to those requests shaped by the society, and they resonate. The messages that we've heard during the electoral campaign resonate somehow with the attitudes dominating in the society. And as a foundation, we took the STEM survey from June 2025 that actually confirms that the typical thing, the specific question on supporting Ukraine with military aid by the Czech Republic. So how would you assess the military aid that the Czech Republic is providing to Ukraine? Almost 50% of people believe that Czech is helping Ukraine too much, too hard. Let's say that the help is too intense. And it's... Czech Republic actually plays one of the most important roles in supporting us with the military aid, with the ammo, and it gave us a chance within the last year actually somehow to minimize the gap. Currently, the artillery ammo amount, we have much more of that to actually resist the Russian occupiers more effectively. I would like to draw your attention to another questions as well of the survey from STEM. Okay. The so-called artificial origin of Ukrainian borders. And with this question, one-third, unfortunately, approximately one-third of people, 29%, to be clear, of Czech citizens say that they either completely agree that Ukraine is an artificial country or partially agree that Ukrainian borders, internationally recognized from 1991, are artificial, like are not authentic. So these questions show us that there is quite a substantial electoral scope where misinformation or Russian propaganda narratives can actually spread. He's not interested. It's not his priority at all. He would like that to vanish somehow, from the agenda. He's definitely not pro-Russian. He's not anti-Ukrainian, let's say, but he has other priorities. So it seems to me that what can change? Czech politicians will not be as active as they used to be. This is the most important thing. And of course, it covers such areas as support provided to Ukraine, financial support specifically, Ukraine's recovery. We already know that in the end of 2025, so Mr. Tomáš, who is the governmental commissioner in Ukraine's recovery, so he will be dismissed from this position, and this is quite a huge issue. This is something that was in the electoral campaign. This was the initiative of the Czech government, but we have to there are a couple of things to mention. First, financial support of the previous government, let's say. Officially, this government is still, de facto it's still there in de jure. This support was still not so substantial. So nothing will really change in the Czech policy towards Ukraine. We'll see how it will look like. Because it's about our President Petr Pavel, his role is important here as well. He is the important player. He will push this initiative forward. In order that Andrej Babis doesn't have the problem with the initiative itself. Michal Starnat, the richest Czech citizen, is getting a lot of money thanks to this, who is the owner of this Czechoslovak group. So this is the defense holding, a private one. And this is what the barrier for Babis, but not the initiative itself. I just have to underline that. Another important thing to say, the last thing for me. Babis himself, from the very, very beginning, he started saying, I will not create barriers for Czech defense business to sell ammo for Ukraine, So nothing basically will change, And it seems to me that, at least currently, he will definitely not actively block it at European level, any resolutions or decisions that maybe touch upon sanctions against Russia. I think there will be no problems. The key change that may take place is that governmental policy will not be so active towards Ukraine. Andrej Babis Ano party's triumph, let's say, it wasn't a surprise or secret for anyone. So this was quite obvious. It was expected. It was foreseen because Russian-Ukrainian war as well. Everything raised. All the prices went up, the credit rates. So it affected financially Czech citizens. Let's not think that Russian propaganda is just pushing only Putin's splendor in the countries. No. After the Prague riot of 1945 and Prague Spring in 1968, in Czech Republic, it cannot be sold. I'm so sorry. By the way, I would like to congratulate our Czech and Slovak friends with the anniversary of Czechoslovakia announcement that they had yesterday. In Czech Republic especially. So what I want to tell you, we have to avoid demonization of our potential partners because Andrej Babis, he is not Viktor Orban at all. He's not Robert Fico. Okay? It's not the same team. And there's another factor that if the current president of Hungary or Slovakia, not everybody will even recall what one's name is. President Petr Pavel, on the one hand, he is really visible. Everybody knows who he is, and he's always different with his pragmatic assessments of the political and military situation. But what's not typical for Ukrainian society, he didn't take part in election directly. So this is the traditions that were laid by Václav Havel. And the very stance of Czech Republic, at some point, this is the Masaryk's heritage, Czechoslovakian heritage, which was always a democratic entity, always has been. And an interwar period between two world wars as well.
Numbers show, at least for the past year, have shown that the Ukrainian population in Czechia has been a net benefit for our economy. We have, if we want to keep it, really cynical, we have earned money thanks to Ukrainian refugees being in Czechia, and our GDP has been growing also partly thanks to the Ukrainian population in Czechia. And that all in an environment where the country, Czechia, has had basically full employment. It is the country with the lowest unemployment rate in the EU, and that also means that there simply are job vacancies that need to be filled and are being filled by our Ukrainian friends who have found a second home in Czechia. And that is something that the current government, in my opinion, has completely neglected to mention in the election campaign. I'm not necessarily claiming that this would have won the election for the current government. I'm not an election strategist, so I wouldn't know. But just the fact that the numbers are there, that statisticians and journalists have dug up those numbers to show that, look, this is the net benefit. It is in the hundreds of millions of euros that we have earned more than the economy has given the Ukrainian refugees in help, in subsidies. And that is simply a fact, but a fact that the government simply completely neglected, and it had to be the journalists who found out what the situation is. For example, using our law to free access to information. They've asked the statistical office to give them the latest data, which have proven that fact. And as I said, the current government didn't really mention it in the campaign at all. At the same time, the other camp, so to speak, parties like the SPD and Stachelo, have been playing the really cynical and full of disinformation note of, look, Ukrainians are coming here in their expensive cars from the so-called safe spaces in Ukraine, so they don't really need our help, and they're costing us money, which we all know is a complete lie, and it's not true. But we've still seen now freshly elected MPs for the SPD, for example, shooting videos where they literally went around streets of Czechia filming expensive-looking Ukrainian cars with Ukrainian plates, and showing, look, this plate is from the West, so they shouldn't really be here because the war is apparently only in the East. So why pay money? And that's something that, of course, is full of pro-Kremlin propaganda, but again, the government has completely neglected any attempt at actually disputing those claims.
Ukraine and Czech Republic, this is already an internal policy and external policy issue. So it's true. What issues have we heard during elections? Pensions, wages, childbirth support infrastructure. When in Czech Republic, in electoral process, they spoke of Ukraine, it was something really close for Czechs. Some painful issues. Jobs, childbirth support, safety in the streets. Something that is every single person is thinking about every day. So you can see in the slide some examples. You've seen that. Volodymyr showed that already. And you can see those examples. They're quite similar visually. Many Ukrainian flags, which is quite triggering and catchy. Also, electoral campaign mottos. They also refuted the message that Ukrainians were engaged in this robbery attempt. So this is quite a typical narrative. If something bad happens, well, Ukrainians must emerge there. So no jobs because of Ukrainians. Robberies, assaults because of Ukrainians. Yeah, so the current government had to refute all that quite often. So the number of Ukrainians, truly many of those are in Czech Republic. This is the country that accepted the largest number per capita. You can see the latest statistics in October 2025. 397,000, even more already. Only those people with temporary protection status. Of course, you can hear Ukrainian everywhere in the streets and transport. I always say that, well, when Ukrainians say, why Czechs are so mad? Because this is a typical response. If in Ukraine we had this inflow of foreigners. In Prague now we have 100,000 Ukrainians just residing. It's hard to imagine for one city. You know, imagine that inflow in Ukraine, what our reaction would be. So this reaction, negative, of Czech people, this is normal when you accept so many foreigners in your country. But how is it used by politicians? It's a different thing. And I want to give this example. Recently, I've talked to a Czech teacher, and she says, in my class, we have half Ukrainians, but we work well with them. They have good performance. I have no problems almost, yes. Well, some minor issues, but it's a normal adaptation process. No kids in schools. But she says, when I read social networks, I have an impression that this is not just bad, but very, very bad. So I just want to stress how politicians were able to use the Ukrainians' presence issue, that people emotionally respond even when they have positive perception of refugees in the country and adaptation. They still perceive the situation badly. She didn't vote for the current government, but for opposition. So why? Because she was emotional. She said, my class is just an exception. My school is an exception. But in general, Ukrainians behave badly and they don't adapt in Czech Republic. Putting it generally, Russian propaganda, especially in Telegram and with Z speakers like the shithead Solovyov or Armen Hasparan, so they actually were very positive about the results. In all Z channels, they were praising Ano and Babis. He is called in Russian TG channels, I'm quoting, Hasparan says, he is not a pro-Russian. He's not a pro-Kremlin. He is pro-Czech. He is a pro-national. Yeah, so his rhetorics, where we hear, Babish's rhetorics, some skepticism on Ukraine's EU accession, we hear it there, and if we should continue delivering the military aid to Ukraine, well, it's taken by Russian propaganda instantly, and they raise it to the top level. They disseminate it, and Z channels say, whoa, finally in Europe, these real men started winning in Europe, those who think about Europe first and not about some countries like Ukraine, not serving any interests like American, Brussels, or European, but their interests. Fico, they speak of, Orban, of course, and now in this team, they will add Babis, the dream team. So speaking of the election representation, in Russian propaganda, they also spoke that Czech Republic already warns about Russian interference potentially, and they try to safeguard themselves at some point. Protect themselves from any allegations. And some speakers were even giving forecasts that Czech Republic may go under Romanian scenario when there will be no winner, recognized winner, and they will not recognize the election result. But the result, for Russia, this result, as they perceive it as favorable. So there were no, like with Moldova, there were no lamentations and accusations and nothing like that from Russia. So we can say that the Russian interference on election day, these were minimal, as they were okay with the result. And the way the election presented, again in very positive tone, and we can understand it from the rhetorics of TG channels and the Russian speakers. Russians expect that in future Czech Republic and Babis will move in that direction.